Hello, everybody. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir, and welcome to the Pick Six, the podcast by the Attractions Group, where we bring you the latest stories from the attractions and amusement industry.
Thank you, Ryan. Before we dive into this week's Pick Six, let me remind our listeners where they can tune in to the Attractions Group podcast, catch us on your favorite podcast platforms, and be sure to subscribe, like, and share with your fellow attraction enthusiasts.
Absolutely, Don. Now, let's jump right into the news. What's story number one?
Danny Elfman, known for collaborating with Tim Burton, is set to compose the soundtrack for the rumored Universal Classic Monsters Land in Epic Universe. Now, Ryan, you get a name like Danny Elfman involved, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, to save some people the Google, Danny Elfman often works with, I can't think of his name. Who's the guy that did Edward Scissorhands and Batman and
Are you thinking Tim
Tim
Burton?
Burton? Yeah, I don't know why that guy's name. I was thinking him with his like hair and stuff, but
I mentioned them at the top.
yeah. So anyway, but yeah, so he did often collaborates with Tim Burton. So if you've seen a Tim Burton movie, then Danny Elfman likely did the music. His style is very unique. It has a very quirky gothic. Imagine Tim Burton's style, but with music, and that's what you're getting here. I'm super excited about it because their collaboration is usually pretty spot on perfect. Now, the movies themselves, obviously, like, were probably better in the '90s than they are now, but with that being said, the collaboration is perfect, and the music is just wonderful, so I'm super excited about that. What are your thoughts, Don?
Well, I think it's a great fit for the Monsters Land. I think, you know, you probably can't find anyone better than him to do that. And of all the different areas that's going to go into Epic Universe, that's the one I'm most excited about.
Yeah, me too. I think that'll be a fantastic area. There's a lot of stuff about Epic Universe that's rumored, and it's very strongly rumored, but it hasn't quite been announced yet. So I think that park is going to be a home run and a half. And the most interesting thing is to see how Disney reacts. Let's be honest here, because we know Universal is going to be successful with it.
Yes, that's always fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next. Okay, so Cedar Fair. They announced a strategic reorganization promoting Bob White to Chief Commercial Officer and elevating Christian Dickerman to Chief Strategy Officer. Kelly Ford will be transitioned out of the Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer position. Mergers, 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 right, Don?
Yeah, the thing with this, I found a little odd that it happens just before Christmas, with the promotions and with Kelly Ford transitioning out of the marketing chief marketing officer position. I found that a little bit odd. Um, there's still a lot ahead that they have to work through before the merger would be complete. So to me, it was just more the timing. I mean, you knew there was going to be changes. There's going to be a lot of changes once the merger would go through. But just for me, it was just a little odd with the timing. What about you?
Yeah, I thought it was strange too, especially because they're saying that the merger will go through like Q2 or Q3 of next year. Why reorganize now unless this was the plan all along? That's also a possibility. I mean, but let me ask you this. What do you think this means for marketing people in the parks? Like, because I know that like we've seen a merger before when Cedar Fair purchased Paramount Parks, and it seems like nowadays it's a mixture of the both people, but at first especially Cedar Fair brought in a lot of their own people. Do you think that it'll be like that?
Yeah, that was a purchase and acquisition. This is a merger, a little bit different there with that. It, I, First of all, whenever someone like Kelly Ford leaves and they bring someone else in that role, even if there wasn't a merger, there was going to be changes because different marketing people want their own people, and they have their own way of how they want it to be structured. And that Kelly certainly came in and restructured how Cedar Fair was doing marketing. She took marketing teams out of the park, moved them all to Charlotte, where they became brand teams and doing all the marketing from there. The only, you know, foot on the ground that you had at the park level, where PR, digital, and you had somebody that was part of the activation, with strategic alliance, working with them and that on some activation type things. So marketing was no longer done at the park level. That was Kelly's plan when she came in to eventually get to that point. Uh, 3 years ago, they did. So somebody else comes in to that role, or when the merger take place, it's always an uncomfortable time for everybody in both chains, because you don't know what's going to happen until it happens. So um, it just goes back to me though. I keep thinking, why now, mid December? Do you do this before the merge even takes place?
Yeah, I mean, same here. It's really odd timing. Um,
Uh, yeah. So I just think, if you're with either chain and you're in a marketing position, um, I don't know. I mean, I think you want to keep that resume updated.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the funny part is to the layperson, they would say, because you mentioned she took a lot of the marketing out of the parks and put it on like corporate level and stuff. And um, I, I said from the beginning when I heard about this that like I didn't think it was sustainable. And um, but the thing though is from the layperson's perspective, you would think like they did that, it didn't work, and she's paying the price. But I think that's the direction they're gonna go anyway, because it's more inexpensive to have a small team of people handling 5 or 10 parks than having 4 or 5 people at each park. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, especially with the technology and things today, you can certainly do it in one location, a corporate office somewhere, and do a lot of these positions, and you can eliminate a lot of positions, which is something that they're going to have to work toward anyway to reduce the expenses. We saw that in the merger announcement, that some of the objectives that they had and how they were going to reduce some of those costs. So there's going to be the elimination of some of these jobs that are duplications and stuff. So, but I thought the things she brought to the marketing team. I mean, she certainly brought it to um, the world we live in today. Where when I first joined Cedar Fair in 2007, um, a lot of it was still the old school way. So I think she brought a lot to the table, and I want to be one of those people that want to wish Kelly Ford, the best, and whatever she ends up wanting to do from this point on, because very talented and had some great ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. So, best wishes to Kelly Ford. All right, Don, what is next?
The Iron Menace roller coaster at Dorney Park, the first dive coaster in the region, is set to open in 2024, featuring a 95-degree drop and unique elements like a tilted loop and zero gravity roll. There's been a lot of photos recently by the park being posted on their social channels that show the attraction taking shape. And if you're a fan of Dorney Park, you live in that Allentown area where the park is located, and that's your home park, you got to be super excited about this. I think the elements of this ride are going to make it perhaps the best dive coaster out there. I think it's going to be one of those rides that's special. And I think the Dorney team has done a great job with the marketing and promotion of it. They're sharing with the guests, all the progress of this coaster. And I think it was like 19 years since they even had a new roller coaster. So it's great to see that there's just so much excitement, and Dorney Park is finally getting a lot of attention, from the coaster enthusiast, and especially for those long suffering fans of Dorney Park that hadn't seen anything, new like this in 19 years.
Yeah, it would be kind of tough to be like have your home park not get a coaster in so long, and not only not get a coaster, but it's not a hugely invested in park. So a lot of us are fortunate to be in the market of parks that get attention every single year in some way, shape, or form, whether you know it or not. But
Yeah, but the team there has taken the ball and they've run with it in terms of how they're marketing and promoting it. I think they're doing a lot of great things. They're generating a lot of excitement. Just love seeing the photos and the videos that they're doing. And you know, it's one of those rides that just looking at everything they're doing. If you're a coaster enthusiast, you got to make plans to get to Dorney Park, because I think of all the dive coasters out there, as I mentioned, this one has a chance to be the best of all of them.
yeah, I mean, not just the ride itself, but, as we talked about many times, the experience as a whole is very important, and it seems like their theme and their look and feel is gonna be pretty special with this one as well.
What's next?
Alright, so what is next? Silver Dollar City, an old time Christmas named America's best theme park holiday event by USA Today's 10 Best, with a record sixth win. The festival, with over 6.5 million lights, Broadway style shows, and festive treats, runs through December 30th. Uh, so I haven't been to that one. I've certainly been to Dollywood's. Imagine this one being better than Dollywood's.
That's hard to imagine, but it is, very well done. I've seen a lot of photos of it shared on social media. I've seen their own social media accounts. It's very impressive looking, and the guests that I've spoken to who have experienced this event, from what they say, I mean, it earns its spot there in the top. I mean, there's a reason it's won 6 times.
Yeah, absolutely. Don, what's next?
Tokyo Disneyland's current Space Mountain will close permanently on July 31st, 2024, concluding with a celebration called Celebrating Space Mountain, the Final Ignition. The new Space Mountain is set to open in 2027.
Yeah. So the thing though is most of the time this would be really, really good news. But the Disney stuff is kind of sacred. And even to replace a dated attraction with a new modern attraction, that's gonna be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people, don't you think?
I do. I do think that will be the case now. Again, being in Tokyo, there's not a lot of awareness about the attractions that you have at Disneyland there, as you would if it were in California or Orlando. So it kind of flies under the radar a little bit, but obviously it's going to have its fans, that live in Tokyo and have experienced this attraction since it first opened. So it's always sad when you see something close.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, you make a good point there. I mean, culturally, we're not really that educated on it, but it might not have the significance that Space Mountain does here, or maybe even at like you know other parts of the world that have a Disney park. Cool. Next up. All right, so exciting news out of Cedar Point. Testing has begun on Top Thrill 2, featuring Zamperla lightning trains with backward launches and speeds up to 120 miles per hour. Stay tuned for updates as testing progresses over the coming weeks. That is my most anticipated coaster of next year. I am so excited about it. How about you?
Yeah, very excited about it. I think it's great to see trains in motion, doing a lot of testing there now. As far as know, as of this recording, it has not launched over the top hat yet. It has gone up the hill and then back, doing that kind of thing. You're seeing that kind of footage out there, those photos. But it's good to see trains moving and, getting ahead of it. And they'll be able to work out any, kinks and that. It'll give them a few months to really work on that before they go full bore with the testing. But it's encouraging to see that it looks like it really will be ready to go when the park opens in May.
Yeah, that's my biggest thing. Granted, they didn't have to build the whole structure, but engineering based off of somebody else's work is probably a challenge in itself. I mean, ask any RMCR engineer. Um, but that's the coolest thing is they were able to, in their construction period, get it to the point where I guess I mean, we don't know what we don't know, but it theoretically could operate. I think that it's not up to power, and it's mainly like a weather thing and so on, but, I know that the park had stated that they were gonna be testing it before the end of the year, but it probably wouldn't be a full circuit, but, the footage that's out there looks very promising, and, I just really hope this goes very well for both Cedar Point and Zamperla, and for me
Yeah,
because I love
yeah.
it.
Now the train that they have on it is parts of each of the trains because there's different colors. So there's like a car from each one because that's all they have there right now. So if you see up close pictures of it, it's you're going to see like a silver one, a blue one, a black one. The trains are all going to be solid color when the cars all come in. But it started out where they were just testing, taking it from the transfer track, moving it over and then doing more of those kind of things, and then getting to where you kind of launch it up a little bit and then it rolls, does the rollback and goes up the new spike and then kind of goes back and forth, like that. That's what you've been seeing. But just very exciting to see a train in motion this early when it's going to be a new attraction. And I can tell you, for all those out there that keep track of your credits, this will be considered a new credit
I
because
completely agree.
it's a new experience. So um, you can argue till the cows come home, but it will be a new credit.
Yep. Top Thrill 2 alongside Top Thrill, the original Top Thrill Dragster, just like both racers at Kings Island are 2 credits.
Don't get me started there, Ryan, with that. Just don't.
Yeah, but you know what? You know what's really intriguing to me, and again, this is speaking from a layperson standpoint. I don't know what I don't know, but I was impressed by the fact that they put in the last piece of track just a couple weeks ago, and they were ready to launch trains. Because this has to be one of the most technically insane rides ever with however many LSM fins that they were replacing, the hydraulic launch and then the brake mechanism. And, they got these new trains that are not too far out of concept only at this point. So congrats to everybody involved. Really, really cool.
It is. So that wraps up the latest industry news. So moving on to this week's listener questions. The first will come from Donnie Lakes. He asks, do you prefer boat, omnimover, or trackless dark rides? Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Oh, that's an easy one. Trackless. I think the trackless stuff is just fascinating. And one thing that always bothered me about the fully immersive experiences is Y especially, like, things like Hagrid's at Universal, where it's like, "Oh, I feel like I'm on a motorcycle," or whatever. You can still see the track below you. So, like, that takes me out of it a little bit. So, granted, like, the trackless dark rides that are out there, and I'm speaking to Rise of the Resistance, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and the Ratatouille, which is my favorite word to say. Um, I think that the fact that you can't necessarily tell where you're gonna go next is such a huge thing for, for that ride experience. I think that that's the best dark ride innovation of the past 30 years.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you and go trackless. I think that's after you experience that, I mean, it's hard to go back and, favor the omni movers or the boat rides. I do love a good boat ride, as a dark ride. Who doesn't? But the trackless dark rides, to me, if I had to pick one of the three, that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, now you give me a dark ride and I'll like it, but, I would say probably it would go trackless, then boat, then Omnimover. But that's not to dump on Omnimover because I love those rides too. If I had to rank them, that's the way I would rank them.
Yeah, I think we've got the same order. We
Yeah,
have one other question there. What's that,
we
Ryan?
do. So we got another question that's from Adventures with Parker. And he's asking, he or she, sorry, they're asking, how do parks decide what new attractions they add? And how might that process differ between larger corporate parks and smaller independent parks? Great question. Great question. Don, I'll let you take this first.
Well, I think it's going to depend on, what the makeup is of the guests that the park attracts, every year to your park. You look at a place like Holiday World, mostly family, so you're going to look to do the family type attractions. Good Gravy, perfect example of that. So that's what you're going to lean toward there. You're not necessarily going to think that you need a 300-foot tall giga or anything like that there because that's not their audience. That's not their typical crowd. They do get the coaster enthusiasts, but for the most part, you look, it's families. Dollywood, it's families. Big Bear Mountain, perfect attraction for that park. You look at the other rides that are in their kids area. It's won awards for a reason because they're putting in the attractions that fit the audience that's coming there, that's coming through the turnstiles. Uh, Cedar Point, it's a destination for thrill seekers. So you're going to have, you're going to look to do attractions like Millennium Force, Gatekeeper. You're going to reimagine Top Thrill Dragster, make it Top Thrill 2. You're going to do things like that. So those are the kind of things that you look at is who's your guest. That's the most important thing. And then you just kind of look at you know over the years what areas need to be addressed. Sometimes if you have a park like Kings Island, it's a mixture. Families, thrill seekers, so you kind of cater to all of them. So some years you're going to focus on water park. Then you're going to look at the kids area. Then you're going to look to add a roller coaster. Then another year it might be more of the enhancements with restaurants and special events. So it really just depends on who and what jars a park to what your game plan is going to be when it comes to adding new attractions.
Yeah, and to add to what you were saying with it, and this kinda answers the second part of the question as well, but, um, a lot of it comes down to ROI, the return on investment. So, for, let's say, something like Disney, Disney can put in Galaxy's Edge, which was what, $1 billion, $5 billion, somewhere in that ballpark. Did they make $1 billion off of it? Yeah, after 5 years or so, because they can afford to do that. But when you got something like your Knobles and whatever,
Yeah, you can't afford. Yeah, right. You don't have the deeper pockets to do that. You don't have the financial backing to do that.
right.
So that plays a role as well too. But again, you have to first and foremost, whoever the decision makers are, you have to know who's your audience, who's coming to your park. You have to have a thorough understanding of that, or you're going to miss the mark no matter what you do. Then,
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree. But, and I think that both of the things we're saying are both, like, very close components. I think they're both
correct.
huge pieces of the pie. But this is more like, smaller park versus corporate park. And a good example, and this is definitely me speculating. I don't know for sure, but um, you know, so Holiday World added Thunderbird. What year was that, Don? Am I gonna have to look that up?
Uh, yeah, I think it was like what 2015, 2016 range.
Yeah, let me look that up for sure. But so they added Thunderbird. So they're a privately owned park that's owned by one family, and it has been for a while. So that opened in 2015. So they haven't had another really big investment uh for quite a while. And this year, the 2024 is not a big investment too. I mean, it's bigger than normal, but they said on their podcast it was like $5 million or less. So here it is 8 years later. So Thunderbird is a 22 million, I think, dollar coaster or so. So they've got to amortize that over that amount of time. Yeah, 22 million according to RCDB. But they've got to amortize that out over a certain amount of time before they consider themselves making money. And I think that was a big contribution to why it took so long for them to go for the next coaster. Like, you're right. If they put in a Giga coaster, it would take forever to make their money back because that's just not the park that they are. But also, $22 million, and they have to figure where did this move the needle? And how many years did it move the needle before we've made more than $22 million? Like, how much can we attribute to that? I think that it took them longer than they thought, and that's why it's been so long before they had, like, a notable investment. Um, again,
Well,
just
yeah, you had COVID in there in 2020, which when you are family owned, or you don't have you're not a you know like a Disney where you have just deeper pockets, in that you had to take a couple steps back. Some of the smaller parks, they had to do that after COVID.
right, and I completely agree that that was a factor. But at the same time, like, the coaster enthusiast community is freaking relentless. If Holiday World were gonna add a coaster in 2020 or 2021 with the original plans, they would have known about it, let's be honest. Not necessarily all the details or whatever, but I think they would have figured it out. Um, but with that being said, it was a long time, and I think that the incremental revenue, the incremental margin that they get out of it, is really going to what determine how often they get these large investments. And part of that also is that the sine wave there is kind of pushed closer together when the pocket's bigger. Let's take Disney and Universal out of the mix because they can afford to amortize over 20 years if they want to. But when you're talking about your Six Flags and your Cedar Fairs and even like some SeaWorld parks and stuff, um, they need to make their money back in 5 years or so. And what they think they can get out of the incremental revenue is going to be what they determine that budget is. Um, so and 5 years is a pretty good turnaround for that, at least in my mind. I'm not an
Mhm.
accountant, but, for something like Good Gravy, could they make an extra $1 million a year out of it over 5 years? Heck yeah, they could. But Thunderbird, $22 million, we're talking about over 5.5 well, a little over $5 million per year. Could they make that? That's a little tougher to justify. But that's part of the not just the budgets and they don't have the money or whatever, because anything's possible. But that's part of the reason why the smaller the park, the smaller the investment in a lot of cases. Did I sufficiently cover that, Don?
You did. Yes, you did.
Okay. So long as it didn't sound like it was totally made up on the spot.
No,
That's
no, and we appreciate the questions, and if you have questions, submit them on our X, attractions_GRP.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, make sure that you follow us on all your favorite podcast apps, Apple, Google, Spotify. We do a video version on YouTube, so search for the Attractions Group podcast on YouTube. Make sure you smash that subscribe button, hit like, and drop us a comment. And hey, this is another week down. We'll see you next week, everybody. Thanks, Don.